Get out of my car! Get out! Madison screamed at me as she slammed on the brakes at Central Station. You're nothing but a lying, manipulative old woman, and I'm done pretending to care about you. I sat there in shock as my daughter-in-law's face twisted with rage. She's been yelling at me for the entire 20-minute drive, calling me a fraud, a burden, a pathetic old woman who had been mooching off her family. Her voice was so loud I was sure other drivers could hear her through the windows. Madison, please, if you would just let me explain. I started to say, but she cut me off. Explain what? How have you been stressing us out for months? How you make us pay for your groceries? You're disgusting. She threw my purse at me so hard it hit my chest. Take your worthless old bag and get out. I stepped out into the pouring rain at 11 p.m., and before I could even close the door, she popped the trunk and threw my suitcase onto the wet pavement. Find your own way home, to whatever nursing home will take a broke old woman like you. She screamed through the window. You're just a liar. As I watched her drive away with my suitcase still in her trunk, water soaking through my thin coat, I almost laughed at the irony. She thought she was abandoning a helpless old woman with no money and nowhere to go. She thought she had won. What Madison didn't know was that everything she thought she knew about me was wrong. What she didn't know was that those settlement papers she found in my purse weren't some small nursing bill payment. If you want to see how this story ends and what happens when Madison realizes exactly who she messed with, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will shock you. What happened next changed everything. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why I'm not the helpless old woman Madison thought I was. Because sometimes the biggest mistake people make is underestimating a grandmother who has nothing left to lose. My name is Violet, and 3 days ago I was living in what my daughter-in-law Madison called the spare room of my own house. My own house, the one I bought 30 years ago as a night shift nurse, working to raise my son Liam after his father walked out. Back then, Madison smiled at me. Back then, I was useful. I cooked her favorite meals, cleaned their house, and babysat their twins Oliver and Felix every weekend for their date nights. I was the grandmother who showed up to every school play, every soccer game, every moment that mattered. I paid for groceries with my Social Security check. When they were short on rent, I covered it. Car repairs, new furniture, I handed over money without question. I never complained when they borrowed money that never got paid back. For 3 years, I lived in that tiny back room that used to be my home office. I gave up my privacy, my space, my independence, thinking I was helping my family. Madison would brag to friends about having live-in help, how I watched the kids for free, while others paid hundreds for babysitters. She'd call me the best mother-in-law ever when people were watching. But behind closed doors, things were different. Eye rolls when I asked questions, heavy sighs when I turned on my shows, conversations stopping when I entered rooms. Madison started saying "your mother" to Liam instead of my name, like I was an inconvenience they had to deal with. The woman who once called me mom had started looking at me like I was a burden she couldn't wait to get rid of. I just never imagined how far she would go to make that happen. It started small. Madison would let out dramatic sighs whenever I turned on my evening shows. Then came the comments about my slippers being too loud, taking too long in the bathroom, eating the good yogurt, the yogurt I bought with my own money. What broke my heart was watching my son Liam nod along with everything she said. This was the same boy I rocked through asthma attacks, worked double shifts to put through college. He would avoid my eyes when Madison made her digs, but never once stood up for me. Then came the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Family dinners became torture as they discussed vacation plans and weekend trips like I wasn't sitting right there. When I asked, "Can I come too?" the silence was deafening. I was keeping track of every slight, every time Madison would say, "Your mother," instead of my name. Your mother left her coffee cup in the sink again. Your mother needs to understand that this isn't her house anymore. Except it was my house. My name was on the deed. My mortgage payments for 30 years had paid for every brick, but somehow I had become the outsider in my own home. I started walking more quietly, speaking more softly, trying to take up less space. I was shrinking myself smaller and smaller, hoping that if I became invisible enough, maybe they would remember they used to love me. But love, I was learning, can disappear faster than you think when money gets involved. What they never knew was 20 years ago when I was still working as a hospital nurse. I had been watching patients struggle with IV insertions night after night, elderly patients crying, children screaming, adults flinching at the sight of needles. Being a nurse for 15 years, I knew there had to be a better way. The angle was wrong, the tip design was outdated, and the whole process was more traumatic than it needed to be. So during my lunch breaks, I started sketching modifications to the IV catheter design. I wasn't trying to revolutionize medicine, I just wanted to help people hurt less. I wanted the scared little boy in room 302 to not cry when the nurse came with the IV. My idea was simple: a slight change to the needle tip, a modification to the insertion angle, and a small adjustment to the catheter material. It seemed so obvious. I couldn't believe no one had thought of it before. I spent weeks perfecting my sketches, then sent my idea to MedTech Solutions with a simple letter explaining my observations. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a thank you note or small gift card if they liked it. I never imagined that my little nursing observation would change my life forever. I never thought that caring about patients would lead to anything more than the satisfaction of doing my job well. But sometimes the smallest acts of compassion have consequences you never see coming. MedTech loved my idea. Within 2 weeks, I received a thick envelope in the mail with their company logo. Inside were several pages of legal documents and a letter saying they were extremely interested in my IV catheter modification. They wanted to move forward with development and needed me to sign some paperwork about patents and royalties. But honestly, I could barely focus on reading grocery lists at that time, let alone legal documents. Liam was going through the worst period of his asthma attacks. I was rushing him to emergency rooms 2 or 3 times a week, sleeping in uncomfortable hospital chairs, barely functioning on 2 hours of sleep a night. My world had shrunk down to nebulizer treatments, rescue inhalers, and watching my 7-year-old son struggle to breathe. The legal documents looked completely overwhelming to my exhausted brain. Pages and pages of dense legal language about patent applications, licensing agreements, royalty percentages, and terms I had never heard before. I remember staring at the papers while Liam slept fitfully beside me, an oxygen monitor clipped to his tiny finger, and thinking I just didn't have the mental capacity to understand any of it. I trusted that a big, established company like MedTech wouldn't take advantage of a tired single mother who was just trying to help patients. They seemed legitimate, professional, and their letter was encouraging. I figured they knew what they were doing, and I was just a nurse with a simple idea. So I signed everything they put in front of me, every page, every initial, every signature line. I thought maybe, if they actually made the device, I might get a few $100s as a thank you. Maybe enough to buy Liam a new inhaler or pay for one of our emergency room visits. Then, I put the papers in a manila folder, stuck it in a box with other important documents, and forgot about it completely. My entire focus was on keeping my son healthy and alive. Patent paperwork seemed unimportant compared to making sure Liam could breathe through the night. Months passed, then years. Liam's asthma gradually improved as he got older. I changed jobs, moved apartments, packed and unpacked that box of documents more times than I could count. The MedTech paperwork became just another piece of forgotten bureaucracy in a folder I rarely opened. I never followed up with the company. I never asked if they actually made the device. I never wondered what happened to my little idea that was supposed to help patients feel less pain. I had no idea that my signature on those overwhelming legal documents would change everything 20 years later. Last year, a lawyer called me out of the blue. I was in my little back room, folding laundry, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Usually I ignored those calls, thinking they were telemarketers or scammers, but something made me pick up that day. The voice on the other end was professional and calm. "Is this Violet Henderson?" The Violet Henderson who submitted an IV catheter modification design to MedTech Solutions in 2004? I almost dropped the phone. I hadn't thought about that company or those papers in decades. "Yes, that's me," I said, wondering if I was in some kind of trouble. Maybe I had signed something I shouldn't have, or they were calling to tell me I owed them money for wasting their time. Instead, the lawyer delivered news that made my legs give out. MedTech Solutions has just been acquired by Global Med Corporation for $12 billion. My little IV modification? It had been used in millions of devices worldwide for the past 20 years. Every single catheter sold had my improvement built in, and according to the paperwork I signed, I was legally entitled to royalties on every single one. "I'm sorry, what?" I stammered, sinking onto my bed. This had to be a mistake. My simple nursing idea couldn't possibly be worth anything significant. But the lawyer kept talking. My modification had become the industry standard. Hospitals around the world were using my design. Millions of patients experienced less pain during IV insertions because of my idea. The royalty percentage I unknowingly agreed to was small, but when you multiply it by 20 years of global medical device sales, the numbers become astronomical. The settlement check they wanted to send me was for $18 million. I almost hung up on them, convinced this was some elaborate scam. People didn't just call random grandmothers and tell them they were millionaires. Things like this didn't happen to women like me. I asked the lawyer to send me everything in writing, expecting never to hear from them again. But 2 weeks later, a thick package arrived with legal documents, financial statements, and proof that everything the lawyer told me was true. I stared at the settlement amount until the numbers blurred together. $18 million. For an idea I sketched during lunch breaks 20 years ago. I kept the paperwork in my purse, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of how my life had just changed completely. I started planning all the ways I could surprise my family. I could pay off Liam and Madison's mortgage, set up college funds for Oliver and Felix, maybe even buy Liam that dental practice he always dreamed of owning. But 3 days ago, Madison found that settlement paperwork in my purse when she was looking for gum, and everything changed. Instead of joy or excitement, her face twisted with anger and suspicion. Instead of asking how this incredible thing had happened, she accused me of being a liar and a fraud. And that's how I ended up standing in the rain at Central Station, holding the key to $18 million while my daughter-in-law drove away, thinking she had abandoned a helpless old woman with nothing. Madison didn't congratulate me on accidentally becoming an inventor. She didn't marvel at how a simple nursing idea helped millions of patients worldwide. She didn't ask how it felt to know that my care for others had led to something so incredible. Instead, the moment she saw those settlement papers, her face twisted into something I had never seen before. "You've been hiding money from us?" she screamed, waving the documents in my face. "While we've been paying for your groceries, your medications, your everything?" I tried to explain, my hands shaking as I reached for the papers. "Madison, I wanted it to be a surprise. I was planning to." "Planning to what? Keep lying to us forever?" She was pacing around my tiny room like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea how manipulative this is? How selfish?" She called for Liam, and when he appeared in the doorway, she thrust the paperwork at him. "Look at this. Look what your mother has been hiding from us while we've been supporting her." She accused me of lying about being poor, making them pay for my groceries. She's been playing the helpless old woman act while she has some money. I watched my son's face change as he read the documents. Not with happiness or excitement, but with the same suspicion I saw in Madison's eyes. "Mom, is this real?" he asked, and the way he said it, like I was a stranger he couldn't trust, broke my heart. "Yes, it's real, but I can explain." I started to say. Explain what? Madison cut me off. How you've been manipulating us, making us feel guilty for asking you to contribute to household expenses when you could buy this entire neighborhood. She convinced Liam that I was selfish, manipulative, probably senile. Old people do this, she said, as if I wasn't standing right there. They hoard money and lie to their families. She's probably been testing us, seeing how much she could get away with. When I tried to explain that I had wanted to surprise them, that I was planning to share everything, pay off their mortgage, set up college funds for the boys, maybe even buy Liam his dream dental practice, Madison wouldn't let me finish a single sentence. You're a liar and a fraud, she spat, and you need to leave this house immediately. Madison, this is my house, I said quietly. My name is on the deed. Not for long, she replied, her eyes cold as ice. We'll see about that. If you want to see how I handle what happens next and how Madison learns exactly who she's dealing with, make sure you subscribe because this story is just getting started. And let me ask you, if your family member had been hiding millions to surprise you, would your first reaction be anger, or would you want to know why they kept it secret? That night, as I packed my few belongings while listening to them whisper about me in the next room, I realized that Madison had shown me exactly who she really was, and I was about to show her exactly who I was too. So there I was, soaked to the bone, watching her taillights disappear into the night. The rain was coming down harder now, and I could feel the water seeping through my thin coat. The same coat I wore for the past 5 winters, because I couldn't justify spending money on myself when my family needed things. Madison had driven me to the train station like I was some unwanted baggage she was dropping off. During the entire ride, she kept talking about how I needed to figure out my own life since I was so secretive. She made it sound like having money was some kind of crime. Like wanting to surprise my family with generosity was an act of betrayal. When we got to the station, she kept my suitcase, saying it was payment for room and board. My suitcase with all my clothes, my medications, my photo albums from when Liam was little. She claimed I owed them for letting me live in my own house, for eating food I had helped pay for being a burden they had graciously tolerated. She threw my purse at me so hard it bounced off my chest, and said she hoped I learned what it felt like to have nothing. Maybe now you'll understand what the rest of us go through. She sneered through the car window before driving away. The irony was almost funny, if it wasn't so cruel. I've had nothing before. Real nothing. Not the fake poverty Madison thought she was sentencing me to. I had worked night shifts while Liam wheezed in his sleep, listening to every breath to make sure he was still breathing. I had eaten ramen noodles for months at a time because that was all I could afford after paying for his medical bills. I had worn this same coat for 5 winters, patching holes and replacing buttons, because spending money on myself felt selfish when my son needed things. Having nothing wasn't scary to me anymore. I survived worse than this with a sick child and no support system. I built a life from nothing once before, and I could do it again if I had to. But what Madison had just shown me about her character, that changed everything. She didn't just abandon me because of the money. She abandoned me with cruelty, with spite, with a level of coldness that told me exactly who she really was underneath all those fake smiles and family dinners. Standing there in the rain, holding my purse with $18 million worth of settlement papers inside, I realized something important. Madison thought she was punishing me, but she was actually just setting me free. Free from pretending her treatment of me was acceptable. Free from walking on eggshells in my own home. Free from shrinking myself to fit into a family that had never really wanted me there. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worried about being a burden. I wasn't afraid of taking up too much space or asking for too much. Madison just showed me that no amount of money, no matter how generously I planned to share it, would ever make her treat me with basic human decency. And that was the biggest gift she could have given me. I pulled out my phone and made a call that Madison never expected I could make. Instead of calling a taxi, I called Elite Car Services, the luxury transportation company I had researched weeks earlier. "I need a car at Central Station, please," I said calmly. Within 15 minutes, a pristine black sedan pulled up. The professional driver opened my door without question, handed me a towel, and asked, "Where can I take you tonight?" "The Ritz-Carlton downtown, please." I walked through those gleaming lobby doors like I belonged there. Because now, I did. I approached the front desk and asked for their best available suite. The young man looked skeptical until I placed my credit card on the marble counter, the special card the lawyers had given me for settlement expenses. "The penthouse suite is available tonight, Mrs. Henderson," he said after running my card. An hour later, I was sitting in a marble bathtub, larger than my entire back room, ordering room service from a menu where the cheapest item cost more than Madison spent on groceries in a week. You see, what Madison found in my purse were legal documents showing that $18 million was sitting in an escrow account, waiting for my signature. Money I had earned by caring about patients, by thinking like a nurse, instead of just following orders. I had kept it a secret because I wanted to surprise them. I spent time planning how to pay off their mortgage, set up college funds for Oliver and Felix, maybe even buy Liam that dental practice he always dreamed of owning. I pictured us all celebrating together, imagining their faces when I explained how my nursing idea accidentally made us wealthy. Instead, Madison turned my generosity into evidence of my deceit. But sitting in that penthouse suite, I realized something important. The money hadn't changed who I was, it had revealed who they were. I created a TikTok account that night, at Grandma Violet Truth. I had never made a social media video before, but I knew I had a story that needed to be told. My first video was simple. I sat on the elegant couch in my suite, holding up the patent documents and settlement letter for the camera. "Hi, I'm Violet, and I'm 67 years old," I began. "3 days ago, my daughter-in-law threw me out of my own house and abandoned me at a train station in the rain. She called me a burden and a fraud. What she didn't know is that 20 years ago, I was a nurse who had a simple idea to help patients feel less pain during IV insertions." I showed the camera the MedTech documents, explaining how my modification had been used in millions of medical devices worldwide. I accidentally became an inventor by caring about my patients. The settlement? $18 million. I kept it a secret because I wanted to surprise my family and pay off their debts. Then I looked directly into the camera. "If you found out your mother-in-law had been hiding millions to surprise your family, would you throw her out in the rain, or would you ask why she hadn't told you?" I posted the video at midnight and went to sleep. I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop. The video had gone viral in 6 hours. 2 million views, 30,000 comments. People were sharing stories about how medical devices had helped their families, praising nurses who think beyond their job descriptions. The comments were incredible. "Nurses are heroes who never get enough credit. This woman deserves better from her family." Thousands were sharing their own stories of ungrateful family members. Within 12 hours, I had gained 500,000 followers. Someone had created a hashtag, Justice for Grandma Violet. Madison thought she was silencing me, but she had actually given me the biggest platform I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I got a text from Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor who lived next door for 15 years. "Violet, I saw your TikTok video and recognized Madison immediately. I have something you need to see." I called her right away, and what she told me made my blood run cold. Mrs. Patterson had been watching Madison for months through her doorbell camera, documenting something I never could have imagined. She's been stealing packages from elderly neighbors, porches, prescription medication deliveries. "I've been collecting evidence for the police, but I wanted you to see it first." She sent me video after video. Months of security footage showing Madison creeping up to porches throughout our neighborhood, targeting elderly residents. There was Madison stealing heart medication from 82-year-old Mr. Garcia, anxiety pills from Mrs. Jacob, the widow on the corner. She was snatching packages clearly marked with pharmacy labels. The footage showed Madison checking delivery schedules, timing her thefts perfectly, even following mail trucks. She had turned stealing from the elderly into a calculated operation. Mr. Garcia missed his heart medication for 3 days because of her. Mrs. Jacob had to call her doctor crying. These people are on fixed incomes. They can't afford to replace stolen medications. I sat in my penthouse suite, watching my daughter-in-law systematically rob elderly people who trusted their neighborhood. The same woman who threw me out for hiding money had been literally stealing life-saving medications from people who could barely afford them. In every video, Madison looked so casual, so entitled, like she had every right to take what wasn't hers. She'd been doing this while coming home to dinner with my grandsons, while calling me a burden. The woman who called me a fraud had been the real criminal all along. Liam called me the next afternoon, and I could hear him crying before he even said hello. His voice was broken, shaking in a way I hadn't heard since he was a little boy having an asthma attack. "Mom, I saw your video," he sobbed. "Everyone I know has seen it. My coworkers, my friends, and people are sending it to me everywhere." But that wasn't why he was crying. Mrs. Patterson also sent the security footage to him. All of it. Hours of video showing his wife stealing heart medication from 82-year-old Mr. Garcia, anxiety pills from the widow Mrs. Jacob, and even Christmas packages meant for disabled veterans. Package after package, month after month, Madison had been systematically robbing the most vulnerable people in our neighborhood. "I can't believe this," Liam kept saying. "I can't believe I was married to someone who would steal medication from sick old people. Mr. Garcia could have died, Mom. He could have had a heart attack because he missed his pills." The same woman who had thrown me out for hiding money had been literally stealing from the elderly and sick. The woman who called me a fraud and a liar had been committing actual crimes against the people I cared about most, our neighbors, who had always looked out for me, who had waved from their gardens and checked on me during storms. I thought this was the moment my son would finally apologize. I thought he would realize how wrong he had been about me, how cruel Madison had convinced him to be. I waited for him to say he was sorry for choosing her word over mine, for letting her throw me out of my own house. But here's the thing that broke my heart completely. Liam wasn't calling to apologize for how he had treated me. Even after seeing proof of who Madison really was, even after learning that I had been the victim in all of this, he didn't say he was sorry. Instead, he was calling to ask if I would still help them financially now that Madison might go to jail. "Mom, I don't know what I'm gonna do," he said through his tears. "If Madison gets arrested, I won't be able to afford the house payments. The boys will lose their home. I know you're angry, but could you still help us? Could you still pay off the mortgage like you planned?" Even now, even after everything, my son wasn't sorry for how he had treated me. He was just sorry that he needed my money and wasn't sure if he could still get it. That phone call taught me something I never wanted to learn. That sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who raised you to be better than they turned out to be. I took a deep breath and told Liam the truth about what I had planned to do with that money. "Son, I was going to buy you that dental practice you've always dreamed of owning, the one downtown that's been for sale for 2 years. I had already contacted the realtor." His crying stopped. I could hear him holding his breath on the other end of the line. I was going to set up college funds for Oliver and Felix, so they would never have to worry about student loans or choosing cheaper schools. Full tuition, room and board, everything. I even researched the best investment accounts to make sure the money would grow until they were ready for college. I paused, looking out at the city skyline from my penthouse window. I was going to fund a small clinic where you could treat patients who couldn't afford dental care. I thought you could give back to the community while building your practice. I was so proud thinking about how we could help people together. Lam, Liam whispered, but I wasn't finished. I was proud that my nursing experience had accidentally helped millions of patients worldwide. I thought you would be proud too. I thought we could use this blessing to help even more people. Then I told him about my new plans. But now, I'm starting a medical research foundation focused on improving patient care. I'm creating a nursing scholarship program for single mothers who want to go back to school. And I'm funding a free clinic, but not for you to run. For nurses who understand that caring for people isn't just a job. The money I was going to spend on your family? It's going to people who will appreciate it, who will use it to help others instead of seeing it as something they're entitled to. Mom, please, Liam begged. I know we messed up, but we're family. I love you, Liam, I said, my voice steady and calm. I will always love you. But love isn't enough anymore. Respect is what I needed, and that's what I'll spend my money on now. I'm going to respect myself enough to surround myself with people who value kindness over blood relation. You can visit me anytime you want to apologize and rebuild our relationship. But my money? It's going to people who deserve it. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know about what mattered most to him. 6 months later, I was sitting in my garden in California, watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. The house I bought here was everything I had dreamed of during those lonely nights in my tiny back room. Spacious, peaceful, and filled with light. Madison was arrested for mail theft and elder abuse 3 weeks after my TikTok video went viral. The police said my video encouraged other neighbors to come forward with evidence. She was facing 5 years in prison. And the local news had picked up the story of the woman who stole medications from elderly neighbors while calling her mother-in-law a burden. Liam sent occasional texts, short messages asking how I was doing, updates about the boys, careful words that never quite became an apology. But he never visited. I sent him my address, told him he was welcome anytime, but something told me he was still waiting for me to make the first move toward reconciliation. He was still waiting for me to chase after the relationship he had damaged. What touched my heart were the drawings that arrived in my mailbox every few weeks. Crayon pictures from Oliver and Felix showing stick figures of a grandmother with gray hair standing in a garden. "We miss you, Grandma," written in wobbly letters across the top. Those drawings told me the boys missed their grandmother more than their parents wanted to admit, and probably more than they were allowed to say. Mrs. Patterson and I video chatted every week now. Turns out the neighbors I thought barely knew me had been watching out for me all along. She told me stories about how the whole street had worried about me, how they had noticed Madison's treatment but didn't know how to help. I wasn't as alone as I had thought. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was free. Free from walking on eggshells, free from justifying my existence. Free from pretending that being treated poorly was somehow normal because we were family. And I learned something important that I want to share with all of you. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the second chance, the third incident, or the moment when their true character finally becomes undeniable. If this story taught you something about family, respect, or standing up for yourself, please subscribe because I have more stories to share about the journey from that train station to this garden. And let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? What did you choose? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who don't know how to love you back. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.